another episode of Phoenix Talks with myself, Micah Brindle Wolf Grant, and Diane R. DiBiase. This week, we are going to have an organic conversation about shame.
Yes.
What does it mean? Where does it come from? How do we get over it? Things along those lines and of that nature we're going to try and cover. We have no idea where the conversation is going to go because, as always, we don't plan ahead of time.
Right.
We don't even talk about it except to figure out what are we talking about this week. So this week it's shame. And it's shame. It'd be a shame if more people didn't hear it, you know? So
a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. Interesting.
That's a weird way to put it.
Right?
I don't know that I agree with that.
That's an interesting, that's a Google definition. I don't know if it's AI generated or not. It was just the first thing that came up. But the idea, I guess, is feeling humiliated.
Yeah. And one of the first thoughts that I had when I was like, okay, well, how can we lead in with this was, it's that feeling you get when you're not doing something the way that somebody else wants or how they expect you to do it. And the response sometimes that's given based on what you do, how you do it, which generates that feeling of, well, I shouldn't do it that way. And then you go to do it that way because that's how you know it, but you're ashamed, or you feel that shame because you know that that's the right way, but you don't do it that way because somebody else wants you to do it a different way. So you get all confused and don't know how to act.
Yeah. And in all of that, it reminds me that shame is in essence you in feeling like there is something inherently wrong with you in whatever that aspect of shame is.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with you, so we need to cut that. Let's figure it out. Why do we feel shame? We feel shame because we are judging ourselves for thinking, doing, saying something that we feel will not satisfy whoever needs to be satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're not satisfying ourselves. So it's a harsh judgment, and the insinuation that you've done something wrong and you should be ashamed of your thought, your action, your behavior.
And there are times that it can only take one response. I'll give you an example, personal one. When I was a kid, I had said something to somebody else, and it was how I was feeling. I might not have used the correct words. I don't even remember what it was that I said, but the response that I got from my mother was, we shouldn't tell somebody else how we feel if it's going to hurt their feelings. Okay, so that shamed me for decades. One time.
Right.
There was no intent, there was no malice behind it. There was no shame. She wasn't trying to shame me. She was only trying to parent me. So in our perception of what we hear based on what our own responses are, it can generate, okay, well, I shouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then feeling shame when you know you should be, but you're not because you're afraid of that response.
Right.
So, and shame is one of the many, many levels of feelings that we can have.
Right. And ultimately, if you are feeling shame, then what is it that you are not happy with about yourself? What is it that you are judging yourself with?
Right.
And why? And is it relevant now, today? Do you still feel that way? Ask yourself that battery of questions that you need to ask yourself in order to determine, is this my feeling and my thoughts, or is this what I was told to feel and what was reinforced with that lower vibrational energy that I've been surrounded with, because that's what happens. It gets reinforced. So that reinforcement of the idea that there's something wrong or you did something wrong or you should be ashamed or whatever is just perpetuating the problem for you. So
Mhm.
that's where you need to solidify yourself and give yourself that love and compassion and understanding and learn yourself so much that you're impenetrable.
Exactly.
Because that shame is coming from that place of you're judging yourself somehow, because why should you be ashamed of anything about yourself? Anything at all.
And it really affects the ability for people to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because now you don't
I
want
mean,
to be open.
exactly. Or someone that anybody who's watching can look for. Brene Brown, she did a TED talk about shame and vulnerability. And I highly recommend anyone checking that out because she has spent more than a decade
Yeah.
researching and looking at different aspects of shame and vulnerability.
Yes.
So why is it important to us? Why do we need to release this feeling of shame? And where, like I said, for me, it was on that one instance, it happened from something that was said. So where does it come from?
Right. Exactly. So that external sources and programming and judgment from others, and you carry that and you take that on and you internalize it so that you become that and you embody that yourself, and then you walk around with all these insecurities and you're not loving yourself properly and you're allowing others to tell you who you are, and
Right.
it's a no. So if you have shame in some category of your life, why? Ask yourself why. Why am I looking at myself that way? And why am I judging myself that way? Do I really feel that way about myself?
Mhm. I mean, some feel shame because of their finances and
Mhm.
their financial standing. Well, everybody else has this, why can't I?
Right,
And of course, the way that that's expressed and felt changes from generation to or decade to decade.
right, right,
I mean, the way that shame is experienced now is completely different from how it was experienced for you and me
right.
as we were growing up. Because when we were growing up, we didn't have immediacy of social media. We didn't have immediacy of this is how you should look, this is what you should do, this is how you should talk, this is who you should talk to, this is who you
Yeah.
should talk to, and
And
how.
and listen, the level of public shaming possible was limited to a playground at school, not the entire world.
Right.
The whole platform has shifted.
Yeah.
And of course you don't want to be vulnerable when you don't feel safe. So how, and because if you're having people out there make you feel like you should be ashamed of something, then you don't feel safe.
Right.
So
And those who feel shame, and those who feel shame,
Mhm.
and that's held them back from being vulnerable, and then they decide that they want to peek out from that and test the vulnerability
Yeah.
and find out, okay, well, that wasn't safe.
Mhm.
So how
Yeah.
do they keep going?
Right.
How do they keep moving through that? You have to, for me, one of the things that has to happen is to realize there isn't really anything wrong with you.
No, there isn't. There is
And that,
really, you're just judging yourself for no reason, because there is no reason on the planet that you should feel shame
no,
for yourself in any way, honestly, because it is one of those things where to love yourself unconditionally, shame cannot exist, nor
nope,
can judgment.
nope,
Shame does not exist or breathe without the expectations and judgments of others being projected at you. Shame does not breathe and exist if you don't experience it from an early, in different ways, in different aspects of your life from different people at very early ages. Because
exactly.
The only reason why we even know what shame is because we've been shamed. Even when you drop something and it breaks on the floor, we were shamed, into feeling bad about it and punished, as if it was an intentional act of malice.
Right. I mean, Generation X could sit and say, boy and girl sitting in a tree, KISSING. And that was shame.
There's another example. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, now it's somebody dressing a certain way and posting it on social media. Oh my God, can you believe? Shame.
Yeah. So how do we help ourselves alleviate the shame? And we're going to repeat ourselves every week with the work that needs to be done so that you remember how to do it and get motivated again to do it.
Because it's a process and there's so many different layers and branches of the process. And
Yes.
part of it for a lot of people is that shame that they feel
Yes.
because they're not where they want to be.
Right. Shame is on that judgment branch, that
Yep.
big fat judgment branch. It's a big branch.
Oh, you could hang 2 swings from that judgment branch that'll hold 400-pound men. Okay, that's how thick that branch is.
Shame is hanging off of that one.
Yes.
Okay. So you build up, if you don't allow yourself permission to give yourself that clean slate and decide for yourself how you feel about things and decide for yourself how you wish to spend your energy, whether it be with people, places and things, whatever, you need to remind yourself that if you don't have a clean slate, how are you supposed to get to know yourself genuinely? Because you're still allowing yourself to be told who you are and told that there's something inherently wrong with you. And that's not true at your core because you're depressed. You don't feel right, that something's off or whatever the issue was. Like there's things telling you that you don't believe that there's something wrong with you in your core.
Right.
So,
and if you've never felt pride in yourself and something that you've done, and that's challenging anyone who's watching. Now we're in a replay. If you've never felt any ounce of pride in anything that you've done, then sure, you can sit there and tell me that shame and depression is all that you know. As a human being, I know that that isn't possible. Because there are times that something is done. Now, you may have been shamed because you were really proud of it and somebody shot it down, that you were holding on to the validation of that being expressed. Oh my God, that's amazing. So that you can feel that pride and have that pride validated.
right.
But instead, there are times that you present something to somebody else that you are proud of, they don't like it, and they shoot it down, you feel shame.
Right. Right. And the reality is, it's just a matter of subjective opinion. And so is this somebody whose opinion that you respect, or is this somebody that you just you're excited about your thing and want to share? So be cautious about who you share with. This is where you have to use your discernment and start practicing self-preservation in some ways. You're going to walk through yourself while you feel shame in certain areas of your life. But when you're in circumstances and someone makes you feel a certain kind of way, you know what that way is. Are they somebody that you even need in your life, want in your life, need to have in your whatever? You just got to evaluate who's in your space. Because you might be, listen, don't diagnose yourself with anything until you make sure you're not surrounded by a-holes, okay? That's number one. We have to start there and make sure that you're understanding who you are.
Right.
Okay. And it's hard to do when you have a-holes surrounding you. That's not helpful.
And there's a difference between people offering constructive criticism,
yeah,
and just being cruel.
right.
And if you have those opinions, now remember, opinions are like a-holes. Everyone has one and sometimes they stink. So we're just going to
That's a
subgroup
great
that
thing.
into opinions.
I love that analogy.
Because it's true.
It is. It is. It is.
I mean, even if you don't have an a-hole, you still have a catheter or ostomy. So, and sometimes it bursts
Oh,
and it hits the fan.
yeah.
But if you have people that are lifting you up with constructive criticism, saying, hey, that's awesome. Would you like my feedback? If they see something that could be better, would you like my feedback? If it's not wanted, don't you?
Yeah. Right.
And if they're given it, well, look to see.
Yeah.
Is this lifting me up? Is this helping me remove this shame feeling that I have that I'm not good enough, that I can't do well enough,
Right.
that everything that I try I'm going to fail? There's another part.
Yeah. So, um, think of, I'm gonna say it this way. What you just said brings me to ways that folks can pay attention to the, because I'm sure people are, I'm sorry, the ADHD is kicking on. I have to slow down and back up because I want to spit out the end of the conversation in my head and not start at the beginning. Rewind. Um, a lot of people feel as though they can't figure out, well, how do I know if I'm ashamed of something? How do I see? How do I know? How do I see? What aspects of my life I'm sabotaging it? That kind of thing. Failure. So think of the words that you're using too, because failure, that word alone brings on shame.
Yep.
What words are you using to describe yourself and why? Are you using words to evoke shame within yourself and why? I want you to pay attention to what you say in your words. Thank you for saying that because the word failure is a big one that makes that shame feeling happen.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, you can't possibly fail. You're exactly where you need to be for exactly what your life's lessons are. So there is no such thing as failure in your journey. It's only learning and continuing to move forward.
Right. And we're not trying to tell people that they should be absolutely shame free because, not everybody can just run around the store complete naked because they have no shame.
Right. Right. Now,
I mean,
what we're,
there's limits.
yes, yeah. I mean, what we're talking about now is toxic shame. We're not talking
Yes.
about healthy shame. You need a little bit of shame in order to take accountability and say sorry to somebody for something. So you do need to feel bad about something. You know what I'm saying? That there's that healthy shame. But, we're kind of addressing the toxic shame.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about shame and toxic shame and healthy shame discernment and differentiation, Patrick Tian on YouTube. Teahan is the last name. Patrick is the first name. You'll find a video that's titled Shame. So he does a few psychology related videos that
No.
are very tutorial, if you will, and layman's terms for everyone to help them connect dots within themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he has a great video on shame and discernment of the two.
Yeah. I mean, shame also falls into the people pleasing.
Yes.
It falls into the need for validation. It
Yep.
falls into the judgment. All of these categories, it falls into. And it's a factor of, is it the main component? No. But that it's more of an emotional feeling.
Yeah.
And it's one that people can recognize
Yeah.
because your entire body shows shame when it's felt. Eyes look to the floor, head follows, shoulders slump,
Yeah. And
breathing. increases very shallowly. All of these feelings and the
If
tears.
left unhealed, it could lead to resentment. And you're starting to mess with your bodily systems at this point because that affects your physical body. And these lower vibrational emotions create dis-ease in the body as well. So shame leads to resentment of self and deeper self-loathing. So it's in the wrong direction. You want to go on the other side, towards the healing, towards the compassion, and towards the love.
Right.
So if you're feeling shame in a good way, in other words, to take accountability and apologize for your own whatever you got to do, that's fine. But that's not usually the shame that we're feeling most.
No.
That's not the shame we need to heal from. We're talking about we got to heal from.
There's so many examples that we could give.
Yeah.
The shame because we didn't make that phone call. The shame that we feel when we wanted to say something to somebody else that could have positively impacted them, but we were afraid of hurting them. And then they wound up getting hurt anyway, and we feel shame because we had the capability of changing it, but we didn't.
Right.
And yeah, we feel a little humiliated when we do say those things and somebody responds, "That's not true.
Yeah.
That's not how it is." Even though you, in your perception, in your reality, because your perception is your reality, 100%, and it can only be changed by you.
Right. Right.
And
You
if
can
that
change the way you view yourself.
yeah, and if the perceived response is cutting you down, saying you're not good enough, well, this is all you. That's why this is a tough conversation, because this is one where, okay, you've done a lot of shadow work. You've wanted to stop with the validation, stop with the people pleasing, stop with dealing with the judgment and everything else that we've talked about. It's one of those conversations where, okay, now your turn. Totally.
Yeah.
To start to switch things around and to release that feeling of shame because you aren't where you want to be. Because that one feeling, that one itty bitty pebble can hold everything up.
It's one of the biggest self-sabotagers there is. It paralyzes you to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all coming from you accepting the programming and perspective of others as your truth instead of giving yourself that clean slate, releasing all judgments and programmings and ideas and whatever you learn, throw it in the trash and start over. If you want to keep some things because they made you feel warm and fuzzy and safe and loved, that's the stuff that you keep.
Yep.
The rest of the stuff, get the flamethrower on her. And
but don't forget to grab the lessons out of it.
Of course. Thank you. Absolutely.
Because you don't want to burn the lessons with it. Otherwise, you're just going to start over.
Right. Yes. You understand why you didn't resonate with those things. You understand what didn't resonate with those things. You understand all the depth of why that doesn't fit you. So do not keep continuing it forward if it ain't working and it's not right for you. Leave it where it's at and decide to do something different completely, including if somebody's trying to shame you for something, stand up for yourself. There's that. Practice your using your voice, practice setting boundaries, practice expressing your perspective as a matter of fact. Because if your truth offends somebody else, but it's your truth, that's not your problem. You can
Right.
share you and share your perspective. You never know. Sometimes that person may shift because you maybe open their eyes to something they didn't know. So that shame that's paralyzing you from sharing yourself and sharing your perspective, and you just feeling ashamed because somebody doesn't agree with who you are or what you are. Mm-mm. You need to start practicing this whole exercising your throat chakra area, all of it. That really helps alleviate and strengthen your core, your empowered self, so that you no longer are affected by that. And the only shame that you feel is when you know you're in the wrong and
Yep.
you're not wrong with your heart.
Now, the tough part of all of that is when expressing to somebody else how you actually feel, how your perception actually is. The toughest part of that is not to let it get fueled by rage.
Yeah, that anger sneaky thing that started with resentment that came from you feeling like you're self-loathing, like you don't have any value and you can't do anything right, and you're rejecting yourself. Stop rejecting
It's
yourself.
100% okay to be angry. We will never say otherwise.
Right.
Feel your feels, feel your anger, feel the rage that you have inside. But expressing that in a resentful, hurtful manner to someone else just because they made you, well, you made me feel this way, so I'm going to make you feel that way. That's not going to get you anywhere except hurt.
And nobody can make you feel any kind of way. You're the only one who's feeling your feelings and making your feelings happen.
Because you believe what has been said to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different layers to all of this.
Yeah.
You're accountable for how you feel, not how somebody else makes you feel, because they can't make you feel any way that you don't give them permission to. And if you don't give them permission to, that means that you don't believe that what they're saying to you is actually true.
Right.
But then if you don't feel good enough about the fact that they just said this to you, and you know that they're wrong because you have been shamed in the past for the same thing, boom, resentment reaction. And that's what we're trying to say. Be careful.
Right. Right. Remember, if you do feel shame, it's an opportunity, it's a trigger. You have an opportunity to examine yourself without judgment, please. With the
100%.
utmost compassion and tenderness. Please be tender with yourself.
Yeah. Be gentle with yourself. And if those feelings and that experience that I just displayed start to come up when you were trying to be vulnerable, because it takes a certain level of vulnerability in order to be able to tell someone else, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because now you just stepped outside of your comfort zone, which is what vulnerability is.
Yeah.
I forgot where the first part of that point was. I just jumped to the end. So
All of the points are leading back to the self and loving yourself and becoming solid within yourself and deciding for yourself how you feel about things. And the only shame we want you to feel is the healthy one, not the toxic one.
yes,
Right. So that
the
you
whoopsies.
Yep. Right. Right.
The little whoopsies.
The little whoopsies. That's it. And I want you to give yourself an opportunity to have that clean slate. It's really hard to do that. It's easy to say, but then until people really realize what it means, and understand how deep reaching the programming is, it unfolds. It unfolds over time because people don't realize right away how deep that iceberg is.
Right.
Um,
They only
the
see the
pro
top.
Yeah. Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, your first family or origin family or whatever that looked like for you in any dynamic, those are your first instructors. Those are your first teachers, the relatives, the friends, whoever just comes through those doors. They're
Yeah.
the first ones you're learning from. Then there's school, then there's people outside of school, then work. This is all your programming from birth.
Yeah.
What did you learn? How do you know if it's healthy or not? Does it feel right? Uh, is that feeling helpful, useful, or keeping you stuck? You have to evaluate so many things, and shame touches in every area of life, just like judgment. It's one of those things that touches every aspect of life if you were at that place.
Yeah.
You know? So you have to comb through.
And one thing, one aspect, let's go to relationships. You've been in a relationship, you, general you. You know it's not working. You don't want to be the one to break it off because you know it's not working, because you know that it's going to cause harm. You know that it's going to take you out of your comfort zone. It's going to make you vulnerable in ways that you aren't ready to be vulnerable. So you hold off. And then you start, God, why haven't I done this yet? But you're still holding on because you don't want to hurt. You don't want to cause other pain because you were taught don't cause other people pain.
Mhm.
So you hold on. And okay, well, maybe tomorrow will be different. Or maybe next week will be different. But things don't change. And the shame that it wasn't done sooner grows.
Yeah. Then you
And
start getting mad at
you
yourself.
start resenting yourself for not doing it when you knew,
Yes. Right.
and then holding yourself accountable for having to come clean
Right.
and being able to do so without shame.
Right. Yeah.
Because accountability and shame, it's hard to hold yourself accountable if you feel like you're going to shame yourself or feel shame as a result.
Right.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. So if you're shaming yourself in that kind of a scenario, understand you're just clearly judging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, you did exactly what your being needed to get you to the place and understanding and that point of the breakup or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
you needed to step yourself there and see what you needed to see and experience what you needed to experience to get yourself to that space. So you can't shame yourself for the process. What you're doing is you're judging and shaming what the process is supposed to look like. So are you projecting expectations of how things are supposed to go and what they're supposed to look like? And are you doing that in every one of them? Do you have like one projected expectation of all when every circumstance and person is going to be very unique and different and require different responses? And learning lessons and processes. Like,
Yeah.
get rid of all of that and just observe. Go back to that state of observation and just allow things to breathe and unfold. And when you're observing your own experience, just say, okay, in what ways have I improved today? What did I learn? And don't dismiss anything at all. There's no dismissals at all. No dismissals allowed, and you're not allowed to say nothing. You
Right.
always learn something every single day, even if it's, well, I learned that I don't like this brand of toilet paper. You learn something. I don't care what it is. That
Yeah.
helps with alleviating shame.
Yeah. And just giving yourself permission to be vulnerable and know that if you tried, there's no shame in that.
Absolutely not.
And that's in anything, not just relationships, anything. If you tried, there's no shame in the fact that you tried.
Exactly. And you try because you're figuring out if it's right for you. How else
Right.
are you supposed to know? So you can't shame yourself for, it's like you're putting yourself in this, well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Right. Right.
You don't need to do that. Just allow things to unfold, be observant, and watch what happens in your world. That's it. No judgment. The judgment tree, that branch, you got to cut that branch off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep
That
the
little
discernment branch.
twig, that little twig on that judgment that
Yes.
there's many of, just
Yes.
snip as they come along.
Right. So I want to marry the word regret to shame
Okay.
because they need to be married.
Yeah.
Um, you don't regret unless you feel shame. So what I want to focus if we're going to do words and focusing on words and meanings and etymology and stuff like that, I would rather you shift from the word shame to I regret that I made the mistake of saying X, Y, and Z. It was thoughtless and considered. I'd rather you think healthy shame in terms of, okay, I regret that I did that to this person because I see what I did wrong. I understand how that affected them in this way, and I won't do that again. I
It's
don't like
easier
I
to
did that.
recognize regret than it
Mhm.
is shame,
Yes,
because shame is attached, kind of like a leech,
right.
to so many other things. It sucks the life out of us if we let it.
Yeah,
But regret is so close that it's easy to recognize because we regret not making that phone call. We regret not cooking that particular meal. We regret not taking that medication. We regret not, on and on and on.
yeah. Well, we have atonement for the significant regrets that are actually regrets that do and can affect our livelihood, health, and well-being.
Yes.
Everything else that it falls under the toxic shame arena, you can release yourself from that because that's all programmed judgment and learned judgment.
And
So
it may sound cold, but if you didn't and you lost your chance, you can't get it back. So someone saying, let it go, I'm going to shift it. Let it be.
let it be. I like that.
Because you can't rewrite what happened. You
Mhm.
can only rewrite your story that you're going to start from
Right,
the next moment. That's it.
right. And energetically speaking, if either individual, if we're talking about people here, if either individual evolve independently and reconnect going forward in the future at some unknown event, then you can reassess at that time if you're now on the same page, if you're now in alignment and compatible.
Yes.
If you're not,
And there's no shame in recognizing that. And that's a journey
yeah,
that goes on throughout your life because you're going to part ways with people that you thought were your forever people.
right.
And then all of a sudden something happens. Life happens and things change.
Yes.
So it's a constant journey of people coming, people going. There'll be a couple that stay, but
Right.
not going to be many.
Right. Right.
And if there are, damn, you're lucky. I'm jealous of you. But in the reality, it's not.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be either.
No.
It's what you have to discern what's right for you, period. You're an individual. You're very unique and you're very blessed.
And if you can't do something better than somebody else, so what?
You
There's
can't
no
be good at everything.
no shame in that.
That's what I say. Well, I can't be good at everything.
If all of us were good at everything, we wouldn't need anyone else, and then life would be really, really interestingly boring.
Right.
I mean, we're talking a whole new level of boring here.
Right, right. Oh, well, I think at the end of the day, I think folks are going to start paying attention a little bit more to how they're feeling and if they're shaming themselves in any way, and start maybe connecting the dots for themselves and how that sabotaged them along the way. And then hopefully you can help yourself heal a little bit. And of course, Mike and I are always here to individually speak to go into more detail, to dive into your specific issues and concerns.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Because
But
every person is different, every person is unique. And there was a point that I wanted to make that came to mind while you were talking, and poof, it'll come back if it needs
it'll come back.
to.
Everything that is meant to unfold shall in its own
Yes,
divine
and it
time.
always does.
It does.
But our today's conversation was kind of like a contemporary dance around
Yeah.
the topic of shame. There were a lot of allusions for you to think about.
Yeah.
There were a couple of direct, but when it comes to shame, it is on such a deep and emotional level. We really do have trouble, just as human beings, to express an emotion and what that means and where it's caused and how it happens, because it's different for every person. Which is
Yep.
why it's probably taken Brene Brown 17 years to get the knowledge that she's gotten about shame. Because it constantly evolves, it constantly changes. There's constantly different ways that we experience it, that somebody else can experience it, which is affected by someone else who's experiencing it on a different level
Right.
that was trained by somebody in their generation before.
Right.
So if this seems kind of convoluted and a contemporary style dance that doesn't really make sense, yeah, that's why. But I genuinely hope that you guys got something out of today. Thank you. I picked up what you were putting down. I looked at the clock and I got just a few more minutes before I got to jump right over to the messengers, which starts at 6 or at 7 p.m.
Very
So
exciting. Check it out.
it
Yeah.
is. And got some great readings coming up and an alpha message, and then the Omega um, empowerment segment we also have going on now. So thank you, Diane, so much for this
Thank
conversation.
you, Micah.
Another great one as always.
Yay.
Not a clue what next week's going to be about, but it is going to be episode 20. Can you believe we've done 20 of these so far?
Wow. No, it doesn't feel like that because they're just great conversations every time.
Right. So have a great week, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, even if you're watching the replay. Thank you, everyone in the chat room who were quietly observing today.
Thank you, everyone.
So thank you so much, and we will see you soon. Make it a great week and keep going.